his relationship with Cora, or Nana as he called her, particularly tight after the divorce. She took care of me quite a lot, he said. She picked me up from school and I would hang out with her playing Scrabble and that type of thing. On the surface, life at Errol's house seemed grand. He had plenty of books for Elon to read from cover to cover and money to buy a computer and other objects that Elon desired. Errol took his children on numerous trips overseas. It was an amazing, fun times at Kimball. I have a lot of fun memories from that. Errol also impressed the kids with his intellect and dealt out some practical lessons. He was a talented engineer, Elon said. He knew how every physical object worked. Both Elon and Kimball were required to go to the sites of Errol's engineering jobs and learn how to lay bricks, install plumbing, fit windows, and put in electrical wiring. There were fun moments, Elon said. Errol was what Kimball described as ultra present and very intense. He would sit Elon and Kimball down and lecture at them for 3 to 4 hours without the boys being able to respond. He seemed to delight in being hard on the boys and suck the fun out of common childhood diversions. From time to time, Elon, tried to convince his dad to move to America and often talked about his intentions to live in the United States later in life. Errol countered such dreams by trying to teach Elon a lesson. He sent the housekeepers away and had Elon do all the chores to let him know what it was like to play American. While Elon and Kimball declined to provide an exact recounting, they clearly experienced something awful and profound during those years with their father. They both talk about having to endure some form of psychological torture. He definitely has serious chemical stuff, said Kimball, which I'm sure Elon and I have inherited. It was a very emotionally challenging upbringing, but it made us who we are today. May bristled when the subject of Errol came up. Nobody gets along with him, she said. He's not nice to anyone. I don't want to tell stories because they are horrendous. You just don't talk about it. There are kids and grandkids involved. When asked to chat about Elon, Errol responded via email. Elon was a very independent and focused child at home with me. He loved computer science before anyone even knew what it was in South Africa, and his ability was widely recognized by the time he was 12 years old. Elon and his brother Kimball's activities as children and young men were so many and varied that it's difficult to name just one, and they traveled together with me extensively in South Africa and the world at large, visiting all the continents regularly from the age of 6 onwards. Elon and his brother and sister were and continue to be exemplary in every way a father could want. I'm very proud of what Elon's accomplished. Errol copied Elon on this email, and Elon warned me off corresponding with his father, insisting that his father's take on past events could not be trusted. He is an odd duck, Musk said, but when pressed for more information, Musk dodged. It would certainly be accurate to say that I did not have a good childhood. He said, it may sound good. It was not absent of good, but it was not a happy childhood. It was like misery. He's good at making life miserable, that's for sure. He can take any situation, no matter how good it is, and make it bad. He's not a happy man. I don't know how someone becomes like he is. It would just cause too much trouble to tell you anymore. Elon and Justine have vowed that their children will not be allowed to meet Errol. When Elon was nearly 10 years old, he saw a computer for the first time at the Sandton City Mall in Johannesburg. There was an electronics store that mostly did hi-fi type stuff, but then in one corner they started stocking a few computers, Musk said. He felt odd right away. It was like, whoa, holy shit. By this machine, that could be programmed to do a person's bidding. I had to have that, and then hounded my father to get the computer, Musk said. Soon he owned a Commodore VIC-20, a computer home machine that went on sale in 1980. Elon's computer arrived with 5 kilobytes of memory and a workbook on the basic programming language. It was supposed to take like 6 months to get through all the lessons, Elon said. I just got super OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder on it, and it stayed up for stayed up for 3 days with no sleep and did the entire thing. It seemed like the most super compelling thing I had ever seen. Despite being an engineer, Musk's father was something of a Luddite and dismissive of the machine. Elon recounted that he said it was just for games and that she'd never be able to do real engineering on it. I just said, whatever. While bookish and into his new computer, Elon quite often led Kimball and his cousins, Kay's children, Russ, Lyndon, and Peter Ribe on adventures. They dabbled one year in selling Easter eggs door to door in the neighborhood. The eggs were not well decorated, but the boys still marked them up a few %100 for their wealthy neighbors. Elon also spearheaded their work with homemade explosives and rockets. South Africa did not have the Estes rocket. Estes rocket kits popular among hobbyists, so Elon would create his own chemical compounds and put them inside of canisters. It is remarkable how many things you can get to explode, Elon said. Saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal are the basic ingredients for a gunpowder, and then if you combine a strong acid with a strong alkaline, that will generally release a lot of energy. Granulated chlorine with brake fluid, that's quite impressive. I'm lucky I have all my fingers when not handling explosive. The boys put on layers of clothing and goggles and shot each other with pellet guns. Elon and Kimball raced dirt bikes against each other in sandlots until Kimball flew off his bike one day and hurtled into a barbed wire fence. As the years went on, the cousins took their entrepreneurial pursuits more seriously, even attempting at one point to start a video arcade without any parents knowing. The boys picked out a spot for their arcade, got a lease, and started navigating the permit process for their business. Eventually, they had to get someone over 18 to signal a legal document. Neither the Rives father nor Errol would oblige. It would take a couple of decades, but Elon and the Rives would eventually go into business together. The boys' most audacious exploits may have been their trips between Pretoria and Johannesburg during the 1980s. South Africa could be a terribly violent place, and the 35-mile train trip linking Pretoria and Johannesburg stood out as one of the world's more dangerous rides. Kimball counted the train journeys as formative experiences for him and Elon. South Africa was not a happy-go-lucky place, and that has an impact on you. We saw some really rough stuff. It was part of an atypical upbringing, just this insane set of experiences that changes how you view risk. You don't grow up thinking getting a job is the hard part. That's not interesting enough. The boys ranged in age from about 13 to 16 and chased a mix of parties and geeky exploits in Johannesburg. During one jaunt, they went to a Dungeons and Dragons tournament, and that was us being Nerdmaster Supremes, must said. All of the boys were into the role-playing game, which requires someone to help set the mood for a contest by imagining and then describing a scene. You have entered a room and there's a chest in the corner. What will you do? You open the chest. You've sprung a trap. Dozens of goblins are on the loose. Elon excelled at this dungeon master role and had memorized the text detailing the powers of monsters and other characters. Under Elon's leadership, we played the role as so well and won the tournament, said Peter Rive. Winning requires this incredible imagination, and Elon really set the tone for keeping people captivated and inspired. The Elon that his peers encountered at school was far less inspirational. Throughout middle and high school, Elon bounced around a couple of institutions. He spent the equivalent of 8th and ninth grades at Bryanston High School. One afternoon, Elon and Kimball were sitting at the top of a flight of concrete stairs, eating when a boy decided to go after Elon. I was basically hiding from this gang that was fucking hunting me down for God knows fucking why. I think I accidentally bumped this guy at assembly that morning. He takes some huge offense at that. The boy crept up behind Musk, kicked him in the head, and then shoved him down the stairs. Musk tumbled down the entire flight, and a handful of boys pounced on him, some of them kicking Musk in the side, and the ringleader bashing his head against the ground. They are a bunch of fucking psychos, Musk said. I blacked out. Kimball watched in horror and feared for Elon's life. He rushed down the stairs to find Elon's face bloodied and swollen. He looked like someone who had just been in the boxing ring, Kimball said. Elon then went to the hospital. It was about a week before I could get back to school, Musk said. During a news conference in 2013, Elon disclosed that he'd had a nose job to deal with the lingering effects of this beating. For 3 or 4 years, Musk endured relentless hounding at the hands of these bullies. They went so far as to beat up a boy that Musk considered his best friend, and the child agreed to stop hanging out with Musk. Moreover, they got my best fucking friend to lure me out of hiding so they could beat me up, Musk said, and that fucking hurt. While telling this part of the story, Musk's eyes welled up and his voice quivered. For some reason, they decided that I was it and they were going to go after me nonstop. That's what made growing up different. For numbers of years, there was no respite. You get chased around by gangs at school who tried to beat the shit out of me. And then I'd go home, I'd come home and it would just be awful there as well. It was just like nonstop horrible. Well, spent the latter stages of his high school career at Pretoria Boys High School, where growth spurt and the generally better behavior of the students made life more bearable, while a public school by definition, Pretoria Boys has functioned more like a private school for the last 100 years. It's the place you send a young man to get him ready to attend Oxford or Cambridge. The boys from Musk's class remember him as a likable, quite unspectacular student. There were 4 or 5 boys that were considered the very brightest, said Jan Prinsloo, who sat behind Musk in some classes. Elon was not one of them. Such comments were echoed by a half dozen boys. Also noted that Musk's lack of interest in sports left him isolated in the midst of an athletics obsessed culture. Honestly, there were just no signs that he was going to be a billionaire, said Gideon Furry, another classmate. He was never in a leadership position at school. I was rather surprised to see what has happened to him. While Musk didn't have any close friends at school, accent interest his eccentric interest did leave an impression. One boy, Ted Wood, remembered Musk bringing model rockets to school and blasting them off during breaks. This was not the only hint of his aspirations. During a science class debate, Elon gained attention for railing against fossil fuels in favor of solar power, an almost sacrilegious stance in a country devoted to mining the Earth's natural resources. He always had firm views on things, said Wood. Terence Benet, a classmate who stayed in touch with Elon over the years, claimed that Musk had started fantasizing about colonizing other planets in high school as well. In another nod to the future, Elon and Kimball were chatting during a class break outdoors when Wood interrupted them and asked what they were going on about. They said, "We are talking about whether there is a need for branch banking in the financial industry and whether we will move to paperless banking." I remember thinking that was such an absurd comment to make. I said, "Yeah, that's great." While Musk might not have been among the academic elites in class, he was among a handful of students with the grades and professed interest to be selected for an experimental computer program. Students were plucked out of a number of schools and brought together to learn the basic COBOL and Pascal programming languages. Musk continued to augment these technological leanings with his love of science fiction and fantasy and tried his hand at writing stories that involved dragons and supernatural beings. "I wanted to write something like Lord of the Rings," he said. May viewed these high school years through a mother's eyes and recounted plenty of tales of Musk performing spectacular academic feats. The video game he wrote, she said, impressed much older, more experienced techies. He aced math exams well beyond his years, and he had that incredible memory. The only reason he did not outrank the other boys was a lack of interest in the work prescribed by the school. As an aside, I just look at it as, what grades do I need to get where I want to go? There were compulsory subjects like Afrikaans, and I just didn't see the point of learning that. It seemed ridiculous. I'd get a passing grade, and that was fine. Things like physics and computers, I got the highest grade you could get in those. There needs to be a reason for a grade. I'd rather play video games, write software, and read books than try and get an A if there's no point in getting an A. I can remember feeling subjects in like 4th and 5th grade. Then my mother's boyfriend told me I'd be held back if I didn't pass. I didn't actually know you had to pass the subjects to move to the next grade. I got the best grades in class after that. At 17, Musk left South Africa for Canada. He has recounted this journey quite often in the press and typically leans on to descriptions of the motivation for his flight. The short version is that Musk wanted to get to the United States as quickly as possible and could use Canada as a pit stop via his Canadian ancestry. The second go-to story that Musk relies on is more of a social conscience. South Africa required military service at this time. Musk wanted to avoid joining the military, he has said, because it would have forced him to participate in the apartheid regime. What really gets mentioned is that Musk attended the University of Pretoria for 5 months before heading off on his grand adventure. He began pursuing physics and engineering, but put lackluster effort into the work and soon dropped out of school. Musk characterized the time at university as just something to do while he waited his Canadian documentation. In addition to being an inconsequential part of his life, Musk lazing through school to avoid South Africa's required military service rather undermines the tale of a brooding, adventurous youth and that he likes to tell, which is likely why the stint at the University of Pretoria never seems to come up. There's no question, though, that Musk had been pining to get to the United States on a visceral level for a long time. Musk's early inclination toward computers and technology has fostered an intense interest in Silicon Valley, and his trips overseas have reinforced the idea that America was the place to get things done. South Africa, by contrast, presented far less opportunity for an entrepreneurial soul. As Kimball put it, South Africa was like a prison for someone like Elon Musk. Opportunity to fully arrive at the change in the law that allowed maids to pass her Canadian citizenship to her children. Musk immediately began researching how to complete the paperwork for this process. It took about a year to receive the approvals from the Canadian government and to secure a Canadian passport. That's when Elon said, "I'm leaving for Canada," he said. In these pre-internet days, Musk had to wait 3 agonizing weeks to get a plane ticket. Once it arrived, and without flinching, he left home for good.